I got a question about dealing with tan lines. So I'm going to show you a couple of different methods for dealing with tan lines using a fairly complex image that has a variety of tones and colors, hopefully addressing some common issues with tan lines and ways that you can deal with them using multiple different tools in Photoshop's tool set. So let's get started. I have my base layer. I'm actually going to duplicate that because I'm going to be making some adjustments to it. So I'm going to drag this down a new layer and duplicate my base layer. And now what I want to do is get rid of some of the angry red here where the sunburn is on the tops of her shoulders and on her face. So I'm going to create a blank layer above my bottom layer. I'm going to name this layer Color Adjustment. In this layer, I am going to get my brush tool and I'm going to do some painting. But first, set the blend mode of this layer to color. Now that I've done that, I'm going to get my brush tool, which is B on your shortcut or right here on your tools, and I'm going to select a skin tone. Now I can do that with my brush tool simply by pushing Alt, and when I do that you'll notice my brush tool turns into a color picker. So I'm going to push Alt and click and drag across my image. I'm holding the click and I'm looking for a good skin tone. This is a good mid-tone there, and you'll notice that that sets it to my foreground color. Now that I've done that, I'm going to paint in on this image. Now I'm using a tapered soft brush, and I am using a pen tablet, so I have pressure sensitivity, but if you're not, it's okay, the same principles work. It's just that you won't have the same precision of being able to use pressure sensitivity when painting. So now I'm brushing with that color that I selected onto the skin, and you'll notice it's wiping away, coloring away, if you will, that angry red glare that the sunburn had given her. So I'm changing the size of my brush, by the way, using the left and right bracket tools, which is a really useful shortcut if you're not familiar with that. So I can raise and lower the size of my brush with the bracket tools. And I'm just painting anywhere that I see what looks like really red skin. I'm using that middle skin tone color to adjust that out. Now I'm doing a quick work of it here, so if it's a big image I would take more time and get more specific, but for our purposes today I don't want to take all day for you, so I'm just doing this quickly. Now you'll notice that I got some outside of my lines here, and I can use E, my eraser tool, E on the shortcuts, and get rid of that if I want. Now I'll go up and I'll paint out some on the face as well, being careful not to get on the lips because it'll make her lipstick go away, but just kind of smoothing out the skin tone. Now if you have somebody who has more variety in their skin tone, you can sample again. You can sample a different area of their skin tone and color it differently there. You'll get the same results with the new color, but I just use this one color for the whole thing. So there we go. Let's look at the results. Well, that helps get rid of that glare a lot. That makes it look much less burned. Now we need to address the actual tan lines. There are a couple of ways that we could do this. I'm going to start off up here on the shoulder using the clone stamp. If you're not familiar with the clone stamp, it is a very useful tool. It's found right here on your toolbar. So what I'm going to do is make a new layer, and we're going to call this layer Clone. My clone stamp is set to opacity 75%. It's set to sample current and below. This is very important. If you have it only to current layer, which is the default I believe, then it is not going to sample anything on this blank layer. So we're going to go current and below because I'm sampling my below image, but I'm actually cloning on a new layer. That way it doesn't damage my lower image. So I'm going to sample off here in the skin tones using the Alt key or Option on a Mac, and just click off here where I find a good skin tone that I like and start painting it in. Now if you find that it's a little too dark, what you can do is just lower the opacity of your brush and then repeat. So I'm just going to paint it in, trying to get rid of that well-defined line that she has on her shoulder. Because I have a low opacity, going over it multiple times actually changes the opacity of my brush stroke, so that's why I'm doing that here. I'm going over it multiple times. This just gives it a more realistic feel. I find sometimes that if you use your clone tool on 100%, sometimes you get noticeable discrepancies in your cloning, and it's easy to tell somebody was cloning away right there, so I try to use a little lighter opacity. Alright, now that we've gotten down here to her shoulder, we've got some complications. The skin here is different. We'll see that we have a very light tone here from where the light is reflecting, and then back where her shoulder blade is, it's darker, but we don't have much to sample from, so we're going to have to be really cautious here. I'm going to sample down here, and I'm actually going to start cutting off that one line from the rest of it down there and working my way back up. This just gives me more room to clone as I'm brush stroking back up the shoulder. Again, this is not a perfect clone. I'm not taking a whole lot of time to do this because I don't want you to be here all day, but you can take these same principles and apply them for a much better clone later on. So you'll see I sampled again up here in the wet skin, and I'm painting down with that, and then I'm going to sample over here and paint in. I'm going to continue to do this until I feel like I've done a pretty good job at smoothing out and eliminating the glaring tan line that she has on her back. Now notice I'm careful to match the wet and reflective area of the back here. There should be some transition, so I'm trying to be careful with that. Now another technique that you can use, but I find that it doesn't give as true of skin texture tones, but if you have a picture in which there's not a lot of texture noticeable in the skin, then an even easier way to go, I'm going to show you this through creating a new layer, is let's do a darkness adjustment. If you wanted to take a dark skin lighter, then you would just do the opposite, but I'll go darkness. Get your brush tool, which is B on your shortcuts. Again, sample. Right here we're going to sample from the skin next to it that we want to emulate. We're going to set our layer to darken. That's easy to remember. And now we're going to paint with that skin tone. And you notice how it's darkening it down. I'm not cloning. I'm not using the clone tool at all. This is just a brush. So I'm not capturing any of that skin tone. I'm just painting a flat color, which can have downsides, so sometimes it doesn't work very well. But in this case, I'm just showing you another way that you can get the skin tone that you want, and then either later add in texture or do whatever else. Now I'll go ahead and finish cloning that off, or painting, brushing, not cloning. Alright, now but you see there, if I take this away on that darkened layer, I just don't have skin texture. Now pictures that are further out, it's a much quicker way to do it, but once you zoom in you start noticing the discrepancies. So what I'm going to do is remove that and just go back down and finish cloning. But that is another option that you can use. It's one that I've used in the past for many smaller images that aren't as detailed, and if you're just trying to do a quick adjustment, that's a good one to remember. So here we go. I'm still cloning down. I'm trying to stick with the different kind of gradients of where her skin changes tones, and make sure that I'm staying true to form. Alright. I'm going to go with a little bigger brush now and just brush down the back from the top, because I'm noticing that I'm losing some texture and I want to try to blend this together. Alright, so we have a pretty good fix here for tan lines. Let's go back and take a look at what the original looked like. This is the original before our adjustments, and this is the final. Now you will see we have a little bit of problems here. Let me show you a quick fix to that. I'm going to clone this real quick, and it's going to look bad, but stick with me. So I'm going to take a clone here, and I'm going to brush up. You notice that it's kind of dark here actually, so We might need to take a sampling from a darker part of skin and put it up there. I know I'm getting it on her hair, and somebody out there is like, oh, that doesn't look good at all. And you know what? You are right. It doesn't look good, but stick with me. Alright, so now that I have that, and I have a little bit of a blend here where it goes from dark to light down the shoulder, now you'll notice that I cloned over her hair, which looks a little unnatural. You could leave it like that, but I want to adjust that. I'm going to go here into the Clone Layers blending options. You can just right click on it. I'm going to move it to the side where I can see it, and now I want to change the blend if. Blend if underlying layer, and underlying layer is dark. I'm going to drag the black slider to the right. Now I'm going to hold down an Alt or Option, and I'm going to split these. If you hold down an Alt or Option and then click, you can split this, and I'm going to drag it out. Drag it to the right, drag it back to the left. Now you'll notice it's allowing that hair to peek through. And you can adjust it to your heart's content. That looks fine to me. That's enough that I can't tell the difference. This is an almost perfect clone. You can see a little bit of flaw here, and I could work this more if I wanted to, but I'm going to stop right there. I think we did a good job. We have successfully removed these angry purplish red marks and this tan line, and we have a pretty well doctored image that looks like she has not yet fried in the sun. So if you have any questions about removing tan lines or anything else that you would like to see a tutorial on, leave me a comment down below, subscribe, and I would be happy to help you out. Happy photoshopping!